Bibles, turn to Exodus 18. If you've been a Christian for 5 minutes or 5 months, you'll recognize the chapter. It definitely, to me, stands out among a lot of them, and it's one I go back to frequently. So, Father, we do thank you for this opportunity to read your word and study your word. And it is a familiar chapter to me. I've read it since I was first a Christian, especially as a youth pastor when I was younger. And I just thank you for this opportunity to study your word. In Jesus' name, amen. As we start, how many of us ran track when we were, maybe, I know you guys ran track, right? Hayden did. He ran cross country. I used to run track, and my twin brother used to run track with me, and I remember he was always better than me. You know, you ever have a sibling that was better? You get sports. I was the wannabe. And I remember a few times where we did distance, and we used to do mini marathons. I don't do marathons anymore. They're mini marathons, 8 miles. How many of us would want to do 8 miles right now? I mean, I would not want to do that right now. Hayden, you would? My goal in the 8-mile marathon was not to stop, and that was victorious. But now I would probably go half a mile, if that. Anyway, sometimes me and my brother, my goal was to beat him every single time, and I beat him one time. That's because he got sick during the race, and I was like, ran past him, but the thing I learned from day one of cross country and track, and I'm doing this to Hayden because he's going to run it next year, right? Right? Yeah. Okay. And is that I never did starting blocks, but I'll just use it as a metaphor. I went out the starting blocks way too fast. Okay? If you run 2 miles, I used to do 2 miles. It's 8 laps. It's a long race that I hated. And if you run too fast, because I was always mediocre, I've told you that before, but I wanted to start with the big people, the people that were really good, state winners, the Washington State winners. You know, these are the people I went to Puyallup High School, and it was like, you know, these people were really good, and they'd go into college and ran in college. You know, I didn't even try out Northwest University's track team. I think everybody could make it there. But I didn't even try out on that one. But we learned that I ran way too fast at the beginning, and I burned out. Does anybody know the term burned out in life, not just track? Okay, so I want you to remember this term burned out. So this is not just to pastors or leaders. Exodus 18 is a huge chapter for everybody who's ever experienced burnout in anything, marriage or parenting. Parenting is, Hayden's 13 years old, and I only have one kid. You know, let's just be honest. We had a perfect kid, so we stopped there, and you know, that way we can do one-on-one discipleship easily. But it's difficult. You know, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint with parenting. It's not a sprint with marriage. It's not a sprint with church. It's not a sprint as a pastor, your pastor. This is a marathon, and we could easily get burned out. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. Moses, who is one of my heroes of the faith, even though he was a sinner like we all are. I mean, some of us, I've never murdered anybody. He murdered an Egyptian and buried the body. I've asked you this before. How many of us have ever done that? Don't raise your hand if you have. I don't want to know. But he did that, and he was on the run for 40 years. Some of us are still running away from God. And by the way, he'll show up big time in your life if you allow him to. Moses did. And God did so much of intervening on the behalf of Moses, Aaron, the people of God, and the Red Sea parted. We know that story. I mean, some of us, from when you were a little kid, you watched the movie. You know, you watched that, and the Red Sea parted, and they went past. It closed. It's a miracle. God showed up. And then, I know you're not like this, because this is like Old Testament, New Testament type of stuff. You're not like this. But the people of God complained. Now, have you ever been a part of a church where the people of God complained? You ever complain yourself to God? Sometimes there are times when I'm saying, God, I don't like this. That's different, okay? But sometimes when you complain after complain, and you're like, I don't like that, I don't like this, it shows the condition of your heart. And so what they specifically were hungry. We talked about last week, they were hangry. And I get hangry a lot. I said this last week. Me and my wife, when we get in an argument, the thing that solves it almost every single time, this might help someone here, is I just take something to eat, and I eat it, and then I'm like, I don't remember what we were arguing about. Am I the only one that's ever done that with anything? You eat, and you're like, I feel much better, right? And And so that's kind of what they were really angry and hungry at the same time. God provided for them. They were thirsty, and God provided water for them. And then they get to Exodus chapter 18, and it's really, I like chapter 18 because it's an ordinary day. And if you've ever been married and you have in-laws, did anybody ever have in-laws, or you plan on having an in-law at some point? It's a blessing, right? It's a blessing, right? Keep saying that, right? It's a blessing. And so Moses, when he was in the wilderness for 40 years, until God showed up in a burning bush, he got married. He ended up having two children. And so he's got all this thing going on, but he's got an in-law. And he's got an in-law that is like his own father. And he's wise. He gives them advice. How many of us have someone in our life that we've given permission to give us wisdom? Like Alice, if I need wisdom and you see something in me that I give you permission to say, Joel, we need someone in our life like that has lived the life that we haven't lived already. And then we go, like Dwayne. Go ahead, Dwayne. Come up to me at some point and say, Joel, what you're doing is not good. That kind of thing. Unless if I'm doing what's good, then don't do that. Don't make it up. But if I'm doing something that is not pleasing to God, feel free to come up to me and tell me that. We all need someone that's like a Jethro, which is what his name was. So let's look at Exodus 18, verse 1. It says, Moses' father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian, they heard about everything God had done for Moses and his people, the Israelites. He heard especially about how the Lord had rescued them from Egypt. Now, I'm going to pause right there really quick, because how many of us like to receive, if you've been married or ever, you receive a phone call that says, hey, by the way, this is your in-laws. We're coming over tomorrow. What do? Clean the house. Or, honey, you need to clean the house. I'm going to go out and go do something outside, right? I'm going to go drive around the town or whatever. But would you please, clean the house and prepare your hearts and prepare everybody to be happy. Everybody, we're getting along. Everybody get along, right? Fake it if you have to, right? Everything's good. Here, put the pictures straight, like that kind of thing. And so he gets, if I modernize this, he gets a text message from his in-law. Hey, we're coming over. In fact, verse 6, you got to fill in the blanks, by the way, on your own. Exodus 18 would take you maybe 5 minutes if you're a slow reader like me. Exodus 18, verse 6. It says, Jethro had sent a text message, not really, but a message, to Moses saying, I, Jethro, your father-in-law, just in case you were confused about who Jethro was, it's a father-in-law, I'm coming to see you with your wife and your 2 sons, okay? If you didn't catch up on the story is that as they were going going back to Egypt, and there was 10 plagues, all of a sudden Moses is leading the people of God outside of Egypt, and he sent his wife and 2 sons back to be with Jethro for a while, protect them from this entire thing. Let's get out of here for a little bit. So it's been a while since they've seen each other. So it's a family reunion. Moses is excited, and Jethro has heard through the grapevine, because if you live in a small town especially, the word gets out quicker than you've ever, you say something, and before they receive it, the word has got out. And the word is, God has done amazing things to his people. That God truly does love his people. And I love that, because here's the story in a nutshell of Exodus. Basically, as I read it, and I'm looking at the Bible, I'm going through and going, these people complain a lot. You ever notice that? Read the Bible, and it's complaint, God showing up. They're like, okay, I love God. Then complain again. Then God showing. It's like a cycle of complaining, griping. Because I know you don't do that. I don't do it, right? We don't do it. We always love God. No, if you're like me, there are times where you do complain. And the good news is God still provided for Moses and the people of God. And so I want you to know something about Moses and his in-law, Jethro. He looked up to the guy. Like I said earlier, I want to use Dwayne as an example. There are times where we've had conversations, talk, and it's been mutual, I think. It's been mutual where it's like I pour into your life and you pour into my life. It's a very good type of relationship. Moses and Jethro was the same way. Moses gave him permission to pour into his life. Give him permission to say, you know what, Moses, what you're doing right here is not good. You need to do this. This is what God's telling you to do. And so he has that kind of relationship. And so what happens is Moses bows down to his in-law. Maybe I need to do that. I was over at we were at Lydia's house, Lydia's mom's and her stepdad's house yesterday for dinner. And I forgot to bow down to her mom and stepdad. I should have, I wouldn't know I gave them a hug. I said thank you for food. It was like our early Thanksgiving meal with one of their family members. And so we had turkey last night. Lucky? Jealous of us? Yeah, so I didn't bow down to her stepdad Peter, but I was like, maybe I need to, but that's what they used to do. It was a very honoring type of thing. Like, it's been a long time. And then they catch up on current events. Look at verse 9. It says this. Jethro was delighted. Say delighted. I like that. When you talk good things about your life to your in-laws, they're going to go, wow, that's really good. Thank you that you're going to be honest with me about God. He was delighted when he heard all about the good things the Lord had done for Israel as he rescued them from the hands of the Midians. Now, here's the reality. If you read the story, Jethro was a priest of Midian, so he probably was not a believer in the one true God, the God of Israel. He might have believed in God among all the other gods that he kind of served. But at this moment right here, his spiritual ears are tuned to hearing what the true God, he's open. His heart is receptive to hear what God has for him. And for those of us that know me well, I have a job outside of the church. You ever see me at the grocery store? Right? I work for Pepsi. All right? And it's not solely to help pay the bills. It's like what it's talking about right here. I want someone that's around me to hear the wonderful things that God has done for me in my life. That is the number one reason why I'm there. The paycheck helps, right? Anybody receive a paycheck and you're like, it helps? But when I start saying stuff about God to people, and there are people that I hang out with at the store that are not Christians. They are not believers. In fact, there are times when I've been made fun of for being a Christian. In fact, as a pastor, they're like, they call me preacher now. I take it as a badge of honor. I like it. Hey, preacher, what's the word today? They always say that. Or if I'm on my knees filling the 20 ounce, and they go, are you praying to the good Lord? It's almost in a mocking way, but I use this as an opportunity to sow seed as a minister, not a pastor, but as a minister in the community, which we all are called to do. And that's what Moses is being used here for Jethro. Jethro is listening to the truth. And I wonder how many of us, we realize that we have people watching us, we have people listening. You don't have to be a pastor for people. They're watching, and they're waiting to see how your relationship with God really is going. Unless they don't know you're a Christian, then that's a whole other sermon. We'll get into that some other sermon. But in this one, Jethro is really comparing the one true God, the God of Israel, versus all the other gods that he's been serving his entire adult life. And he's going, wow. And verse 11 is I believe his conversion moment. And I remember my conversion moment. It was at a church called Sumner Assembly of God. It was in 1996, and I was at an altar, and I said yes to Christ. And I didn't really serve other gods, but in the past, I did hear about different false religions and that kind of thing, and I made up my mind in 1986, October 11th, that I'm going to serve God for the rest of my life, somehow, some way. And later in 1997, then God called me into ministry full-time, but I said, no matter what, God, I'm going to serve you with my life for the rest of my life. Somehow, somewhere, if I have to work as a mechanic, or you don't want me to work as a mechanic, but I'm just throwing that out. If you want me, God, to work as a Pepsi employee, if you want me to be a missionary, if you want me to be a pastor, if you want me to be a stay-at-home dad, I won't do, he's old enough to go to school and that kind of stuff, but if you want me to do that I'm going to serve you with all my heart. And that's what Moses was doing, and Jethro was listening to this. And look at verse 11. I love this. I read this a lot, but it really stood out to me, this verse. Because Jethro says this, I know now that the Lord is greater than all other gods. I don't think that any of us serve those lowercase gods, like physically. Like I don't have Asherah pole in my house. I don't have a little wooden statue of Buddha. I don't have a Buddha statue. That's over at the Chinese restaurant. You know what I mean? But we serve other things and other people and other situations like they are our God. But we need to make a decision in our life like Jethro to say, you know what? I know that God, capital G, capital Lord, the Lord, is greater than any other thing that I could put my life into. I can serve anything else, and it's never going to match up to a relationship with God. And that's why, I'll be honest with you. There are times, maybe this is too blunt, but there are moments in my Christian walk that I've wanted to quit. Anybody else there? Does anybody else, can we just be honest? Like, we're sometimes too holy to admit that. Like, I've never wanted to give up on God because he's never given up on me. There are moments where I said, it might be a little bit easier if I didn't go to church. Maybe it would be easier if I didn't serve God. Maybe it would be easier if I quit doing the whole Jesus thing and just live my life. Because I'm in conversations all the time on Facebook. If you want to go on a deep conversation, just talk about Jesus on a thread on Facebook, and people will keep talking about it. And I got myself a deep conversation with people about Jesus, and I had like 50 people basically mocking me. More than that. I had to stop doing the conversation, but I was just trying to encourage people, and it was like, backfired. But, I so desperately want to be like Moses here, where I'm speaking to people, and they're receptive. Sometimes they're not receptive. These people on Facebook, they really weren't. But Facebook fighting is fun, kind of. It wasn't fighting, but These keyboard warriors are like, yeah, I don't know about that, but it's greater than all of the gods because he rescued his people from the oppression of the proud Egyptians. See, Jethro's theology is forming right here. We all need to come to a place in our life. If you've been a Christian for 100 years or 50 years or 20 years, 22 years, you need to come to the place where you're allowing your beliefs in God, with the Bible, of course, to form your beliefs, to really shape who you believe God to be. Here's what Jethro is saying now. Your God, Moses, is becoming my God, and I believe with all my heart that he's the greatest God that we could ever serve, and he rescues his people time and time and time again from, right there is the proud Egyptians, but he will rescue you from your situation that you find yourself in, that you've made yourself, you probably dug the hole yourself and jumped in. And you're like, how do I get out? And Jesus is the one that's offering the hand, and he's pulling you up. In fact, I would think that in even a better illustration, he's jumped in the hole and lifted you up out, and then he supernaturally comes out, and the Holy Spirit lifts him up and that kind of thing. But I love this story because I want you to think about your story for a minute. I wrote this down. I do not want to miss this because it's kind of a funny rhyme. But give God glory through sharing your story. Anybody remember that? Rhyming helps me remember. So give God glory by sharing your story. And I want to be honest, there have been times where a pastor told me that. Joel, you have a story. You have a story. You could share it with other people. And my story when I was a high schooler was, I never got into drugs. I never did that or that. I wasn't perfect. Just ask my parents, right? I wasn't perfect. Just ask my sister. My younger sister used to tease her all the time. But I didn't get into drugs. I didn't really have a story. And then God started doing stuff in my life when I was 16 years old, 17 years old, 18 years old. And I learned that no matter your history, no matter how bad or, quote, how good you had it, because I had it pretty good. I was blessed with wonderful parents and a great church. I was just blessed. But God showed me that I had a story to share with people. And there had been moments, there have been times where I led people to the Lord. But more than times than not, it's sowing a seed in people's life. Like they're watching me. They're watching you. They're watching all of us to see how God is impacting your life. And when you struggle and you go through pain and you go through heartache and you go through all sorts of stuff that everybody just goes, I just want to give up. You lean on God. You turn your eyes, as Lydia said, saying, you turn your eyes on Jesus. And when you do that, people are going, either you're delusional or you truly believe. in this God of yours. And I'm more of I'll believe in the God. If I'm watching, Colleen, if I'm watching your life and you're going through some struggles as anybody does, and you're leaning on Jesus even through the struggles, especially when you're going through struggles, it encourages my faith going, you know what, I can go through struggles and I can still trust in God. Because obviously she believes in this God that's going to take care of her, that's going to take her from where she's at to where she needs to go, even when she's going through struggles, even when I'm going through struggles. We all go through times of trials and tribulations. Now, this is interesting because you ever have an ordinary day when you're weary? Monday morning. Like I get up and I'm like, after the first cup of coffee, I feel good, but then really quick I go, is it Friday yet? That sounds very non-pastoral. I just go, okay, now I got to take this 12-pack of Pepsi and put it in the slot there, and I'm like, ooh, I feel really important now. Anybody else, would that make you feel important or not? Like Lydia is a teacher, and she's impacting the next generation of people, of young adults, and I'm putting Pepsi on the shelf. I'm putting a bottle in the little cooler there. But then I remember God uses the ordinary day to impact the world. And it's funny because in the story that we read in chapter 18, what happens is Jethro he didn't become a Christ follower, but I'm going to modernize it. He gave his life to Christ. They celebrated with having a worship service, if you read it, a really short time of where they're offering God a sacrifice and that kind of thing. Then, the next day, and I'm just going to call it Monday, because maybe you'll understand. How many of us like Monday, right? Like, there are people that I come in contact and they go, I love Monday, but I'm retired, right? But if I have 27 more years to go work, that's a hard thing to wrap my mind around. But Monday, to me, represents the ordinary day of my life, of driving to Clonagers, going to the grocery store, filling that, and going to the other Clonagers, filling that. And it's just one of those things. And this is an ordinary day. And I want you to imagine this. You've read Exodus, okay? Look at what supernatural stuff has happened so far in the story. Hasn't God just time and time again supernaturally did, I would say, wonderful things? The plagues weren't so wonderful, but the honest truth, it got Pharaoh's attention, and finally he let them go. The Red Sea parted. God provided manna. God provided water. All sorts of stuff. And then Moses, there's a little slice of regular day where Moses could have been. This is what God's led me to, is what he's doing. Look at this in verse 13. The next day, or I'll just say Monday morning, Moses took his seat to hear the people's disputes against each other. Pause. More griping. If you're taking notes in your mind or physically, I want you to, the number one word that I get in this entire thing is, the sentence I want to get at is, God's people often gripe, period. That doesn't really give me that much motivation. But then it won't make me feel alone. Sometimes I gripe. Does anybody else gripe? Right? And you're like, oh, my life's so horrible and poor. But he took his seat to hear the people's disputes against each other. And look at this. They waited before him from morning till evening. See, I can clock in and clock out. Anybody have a job that you've ever had that you can clock out? If you own a business, probably not. You're like, okay, got to go, right? When work calls me in, I got to go. But for some people, they can clock in and clock out, or they push the button and they write it. I write mine down, my hours. But for Moses, this is an ordinary day. Look at what has happened to him. From God showing up big time, which is always what happens in my. Sometimes God does wonderful, wonderful, wonderful things, and you have an awesome worship time with the family of God, and then Monday rolls around and you go, what am I doing with my life? Maybe you've never done that, but I know I have, right? And so this is so ridiculous, in my opinion. You have over 2 million Israelites who are complaining and griping and doing all sorts of they're just like, Moses, we don't really like what's going on here. You fix it. Dwayne, fix it. I got problems. You fix it. I can't fix it myself, so you need to do it. Right? And this is what Moses is here. Imagine that you did that every single day for 7 days a week. You didn't have a day off. That's emotionally, physically, spiritually draining. What happens when you are going and going and going and you do not stop? You get on the verge of burnout. Or you're just downright burned out and you're done. So, anybody, you ever been burned out in anything? I'm not talking about just spiritually, just in a job or marriage. Or what happens to your relationships with people around you? A little touchy, right? You're like, right? Like I'm a little burned out, so I'm on edge when I'm burned out, on the verge of burnout. I am on edge, right? Right? Everybody thinks I'm a big teddy bear, It's like, oh, But if I'm on the verge of burnout, and right this second, no, I'm not. I'm doing great when it comes to that kind of stuff. But there have been moments when my burnout put me on edge. Maybe no one else can relate to that, but I know what it means to be on burnout, because you want to be God's superhero. You want to be I want to be Moses. I want to be able for people to go, wow, Joel's not perfect, but he is the man. We look up to him. He's so good. Someday they're going to write a book about him, right? Someday people are going to read about his story, and they're going to be amazed. Really, I want to be God's superhero? That's what Moses is being here. It's ridiculous. He wants to be the hero here. He feels like, 2 million people need me, so I better not fail them. You ever feel like people need you and you can't fail them? If I stop doing what I'm doing, I'm going to fail them, and they're going to be mad at me. Any people pleasers here? You're miserable. You're miserable, because I am too. I've learned less and less and less. Is this true? I'm less of a people pleaser than I used to be. Okay? But there are times when I kept doing things because I didn't want to discourage, or I didn't want somebody to be mad at me. So I did things thinking that God called me to do it. But it can be draining. Now look at what Moses says, because Jethro, he's watching this entire thing. Remember that. He's sitting there, he's going, oh, this is not good. I need to say something. And he gave him permission. Moses gave Jethro permission to call him on his stuff. Like, this is not good. Verse 15 and 16, it says that Moses replied, because the people come to me, say me, I'm important to get a ruling from God, because me and God, man, this is all about me and God. That's it. This is not about the people. This is about me and God. When a dispute arises, they come to me. What am I supposed to do? And I am the one who settles the case between the quarreling parties. I inform the people of God's decrees and give them his instructions. Boy, he views himself so highly. Like God, he's throwing the God card out there. God told me I have to do this. Let me ask you a question. Does God call you to burn out? Does God call you to do and go and go and go and go and sacrifice your health and your sanity and the sanity of the people around you so that you could just keep going and going and going and going, and at the end, maybe at the end of your life, you burn out and then you're done? Listen to me. Not even as a Christian, as a human being, there have been moments where I was on the verge of burnout. And let me just be honest with you. Set everything aside. I was just I didn't enjoy life. I enjoyed nothing. I couldn't enjoy work. Imagine that. That's like an oxymoron. But I couldn't enjoy work. I couldn't enjoy being with people because I was burdened. My shoulders, it was too heavy. I was like, oh. I have this big weight on my shoulder, and God's going, who do you think you are? Are you Superman? Are you God? Who do you think? You got the weight of the world on your shoulders, and you think that you're God. And this is years ago, I had to come to a point in my life where I go, you know what? This is so elementary. But there is a God, the God of the universe, the one true God who saved me, healed me, delivered me, changed me, transformed me, and I'm not him. I'm not him. That might be the one takeaway. You drive home and you're like, hey, what did Joel talk about today? Oh yeah, I'm not God. But there is a one true God. And so that's what Moses, he's going, there's a lot of I and me here. I have to do this. Me. They come to me. And there's 2 million people plus right now. Because again, remember I told you from week 1 that they kept multiplying like rabbits because they didn't have TV back then. So all they did was just have kids. boom, boom. And then, so they're multiplying. The people of God, Israel is growing at a fast rate. And so Moses thinks he can handle 2 million. How many of us could handle 2 million people on our own? Even with an Aaron, I don't think so. If you have 2 million people coming up to you, you're looking at the long line, you're going, wow, that is a long line. Hold on, take a number. Okay, who's next, right? No one could do that. No one could do what God is calling you to do on your own. But I'd like to think that God never called Moses to do that. I just don't think so. And Moses, he's overwhelmed. And then he goes to Jethro. Jethro, I'll just call him Dwayne. Dwayne comes up to Joel. And he says, this is not good. Wow, that's deep. Okay? This is not good. Wow, that is very, very, man, someone needs to write that down. This is not good. Hold on. Didn't remember what that means. But this is not good, Moses' father-in-law exclaimed. You're going to wear yourself out. Oh, and the people too. Because you're not caring about them, really. They're wearing you out, so you're not going to be happy to be with them. And this job is too heavy a burden for you to handle by yourself. Have you ever had a burden that was way too heavy for you to carry? And it might not even be a physical thing. It might not be a job. It might be a relationship. It might be your finances. It might be a ministry that you're doing. It might be that you're talking to people about Jesus outside of this building, and which you should do. It's a wonderful thing. It's awesome. But it's a burden. You're like, I cannot do this anymore. It's a burden. Because you're not meant to be this hero, Lone Ranger, Superman, Superwoman type of person. This is not good. Now, I hope that you have a Jethro in your life. If you have a million people coming up to you and telling you at the same time, this is not good, that's overtaxing. Like, calm down. I'm only one person. I know I'm not perfect. But if you choose those people that you trust, a Jethro in your life that can say, you know what, Joel? What you're doing is not good. You're going to wear yourself out. This is too heavy of a burden all by yourself. For just a moment, just imagine that you're burned out. Maybe you're not right now, but you have been. What does that impact in your life for a negative thing? It impacts everything. It impacts your physical body. It impacts your relationships. It impacts your finances. It impacts your relationship with God, your time with the Lord. It's just overwhelming. And you're just squished down to the ground. And you need God to free you. And I think God's going to free a lot of us today. Now, Jethro. Remember, Jethro, if you read the story, he just, in my opinion, if you read it, he just realized for his first time that God is the one true God. So I'm going to call it for what it is. I think he got saved. Okay? I think he became a Christ. He didn't talk about Jesus, but he became what we would call a Christ follower. He's going to follow God. He could not deny what God had done for the people of God. So he said, you know, I'm going to follow that God. Now, all of a sudden, God has given him wisdom. I think God gave him wisdom. And he said, you know what, Moses, I want all these millions of people to just sit down for a minute. Just, and like, hey, sit down. I want you to take 1,000 people over here, put a leader over them. I want you to put 100 people, put a leader over that group. Get 50 over here, put a leader over them. And then that small group that's over here just kind of by themselves, there's only 10 of them, can I count? They're over there goofing off. Put a leader in front of them. And then here's what happens. When they start having disputes and gripes and complaints, the minor issues, and most of the time they're just minor. When people gripe, they're like, really? Really? You're griping about that? Your life is pretty good. And so when they have minor issues, they can handle it themselves. Then when someone has a major issue, they can come up to you. Then we can really, you, Moses, can focus on what God's really having you do. What is he having him do? Lead the people of God to the promised land. They're kind of being stalled right here because of, I would say, Moses' disobedience by being way too busy. Too busy, too busy, too busy. He's overburdened. He's overtaxed. He's not good. He's going to wear himself out. And then look at verse 23. I love this. We all like peace, right? Anybody else like chaos, or do you like peace? Give me a little bit more chaos, Pastor. No, I like this because he says this. This is what he goes on in verse 23. If you follow my advice and if God commands you to do so, like check this with God first, then you will be able to endure, say endure, the pressures, and all these people will go home in peace. Here's the thing. Your life, no matter what happens, there's going to be some pressure. Like, you just wake up and breathe, there's going to be some kind of pressure. You're going to be taxed at some point. You're going to be stretched. You're going to be pulled. You cannot help that. Like, Monday morning when I go into the store, more times than not, the manager of the store, who's not my direct boss, but he'll say something like, well, this weekend we ran out of this and this and this and this. Like, that's Monday morning. That's just the first 30 seconds of my week. It's like, I better just relax for a minute. Hold on. I need another cup of coffee. That's what I usually do. But I so want to have this ability that God gives each one of us to not only survive, but thrive in him and endure the pressures of the things that God's calling us to do. And then where we are in peace, where the chaos is minimal. Sometimes you can't help yourself but have chaos. Sometimes you don't do it yourself, but people bring it on you. But how in the world we're almost done here. How do you live your life without burning out? How do you do it? Some of us would say it's impossible. But I want to be honest with you. Some of us are burned out, and it's our fault. We've chosen it. We've chosen burnout. We said, I can't quit this because I'm needed. What would the people think if I gave up on this? If I said no to this? What would they say? So we just keep going. We just keep going. I've served as a youth pastor at a church where I was overtaxed. I was in my early 20s, so I thought I had all the energy in the world. I think I kind of did, but I felt burdened by a lot, but I just kept going because I didn't want to let my senior pastor down. I don't want to let him down. Like, he was the guy who led me to the Lord. I didn't want to let him down. He was my best man at my wedding, right here. I didn't want to let the guy down. And I just kept going, and I just kept going, and I just kept going, and it burned me out even before graduation of college. Before I moved here, I was like, and I learned these 4 things I'm going to throw in here really quick. It's number 1, it's so important, but it's difficult to do because some of us don't want to be honest. Self-reflection. Like, look at yourself in the spiritual mirror, or how is everything going in your heart? There are moments where I have to stop everything. I just go, Joel, how is the condition of my heart? I don't really like this. I don't like what I see. And how do I start knowing when my heart condition is not that good? If I start snapping at people. You know what I mean? If I I'm on edge. And there are people, I'm like, man, Joel, you're so happy. You just joke around and I'm a goofball. But if I know that I'm on edge, I'm like, okay, self-reflection time. Because here's what happens. We are in a culture everywhere, even in a small town, everywhere. Maybe even especially in a small town. We worship and idolize the people who are self-sufficient. They do everything. You know someone that seems like they do everything? Like they're involved in that, they're involved in this, they're involved in that. And they just keep going. Let me tell you a little secret. It's phony. It's fake. The whole Superwoman, Superman thing, it's phony. It's kind of like I thought about this morning. If you've ever been on Facebook and you share a picture on Facebook, you always crop out what you don't want people to see. You always cut out the part of the picture that you don't want someone to see. I'll give you a silly example. There's 3 of us in our family. We have a dog. His name's Pork Chop. And I didn't name him, but I like little Pork Chop. But imagine if I took a picture and the reality, and I'm taking a picture of real life. Pork Chop is eating shoes. He's over here eating a shoe, and there's stuff everywhere. Now, he's a good puppy. But once in a while, he's eating their shoes. That was my fault for not putting them away. And in the picture, I'm giving Hayden a big old bear hug, but I'm squeezing him as hard as I can. Like, take a good picture, dang it. But then we crop out that picture and all we see is our smile, like everything's good. Everything's all, like the shirt's like ironed, but the rest of my clothing is like just messy and dirty and filthy. See, that's what life is like. We don't want to share with people the reality of the mess that we're in. So when we worship and idolize people who are seemingly perfect, but it's all an act. It's a house of cards. It really is. I mean, it's just, if we were being honest, it was one little, and the whole stack of cards would just come tumbling down. But we don't want that to happen to us. Our entire life just collapses. We need to self-reflect about how things are going. And number 2 is so hard. It's a little easier these days. But if someone came up to me and said, Joel, can you do this? My automatic answer was, yes. Okay. Because I want to be the hero. If the school asked me to do something, yes. If someone at the store wanted me to do something, yes. If someone wanted me to do this, do that, yes, yes, yes. I'll just do it. And then I'd be griping and complaining at home. I can't believe they're making me do this. You ever been there? I mean, but you do it because you don't want to let them down. So I'd say, yes. And then after I was driving home, I'm going, why did I say yes? Learn to say no. Say no. Wow, that was good. You guys are good. I'm good. No. Right? Like, I don't want to say no because that sounds like a 5-year-old. No. That sounds like when Hayden was little. No. Go clean your room. No. No. Listen to me. There are times when you are doing things that are not good, and it's destroying your heart. It's destroying your spirit. It's destroying your body. And in fact, even more important than that, God has specifically probably told you no. Now, if you're saying no to everything, even what God's saying yes to, that's another sermon. Because I know people who are saying no to everything. It's like, no, God told you yes on that. You know it. But there's things that they're doing that God has said no. God has given us little signs in our lives. I told you earlier, if I'm on edge, that's a sign. That is a good sign that I've got to step back and evaluate and say, what do I need to say no to? What good thing do I need to say no to so that I can focus on what God wants me to do? Because I don't want to sacrifice my life and my salvation and my heart and the condition of my mind at the altar of being burned out in ministry and doing everything and being a hero. I don't want to be superhero, Superman, super Christian. Man, Joel, you're so amazing. I don't want anyone to say that. You know, like I'm the one. Number 3, this is huge, but take care of yourself. A while ago, I realized that I never could enjoy anything. Even good things were unenjoyable. You ever been there? I had to learn to do things that took care of me, took care of myself, and I had to do something that was enjoyable to me. It's so important to my state of mind and my state of heart because I felt like I was running on empty. Like I was just running on fumes. And like right now, sometimes, like the other day, I think it was yesterday. Was it yesterday we were at Wade's dropping off something? Hey, anyway, every day is the same, but I was outside and we were delivering something at Wade's house, and there were all these bugs around, you know, these little October, November bugs that like, you know, these little furry blue bugs. I love going outside, but not with those bugs. One of the things that fills me up and makes me feel good is to go out and go walk or go hiking, do that kind of, go out in the outdoors, go to the river, go to Clearwater River, and it makes me feel great, okay? I want to do things that help me out so that it frees my mind a little bit. It opens me up to what God is speaking. I don't know how many times I've gone to the river and all of a sudden, conveniently, I can hear God's voice again. And it's just, it's doing the things that God has wired you to enjoy. Sometimes people don't want to go outside. They just want to stay inside. Another thing I want to do is I always want to read. Maybe people don't like reading, but I like to read and have a cup of coffee. It makes me feel just good. And then it fills me up so that when it's time to pour out to people, I'm full. I'm overfull. God has filled me up, and I can pour myself out into other people. And I'm not running on empty. I'm not running on fumes. And last thing, this is so important. Keep the main thing the main thing. What is the main thing in your life? I mean, if I had a piece of paper like this, and I could just write one phrase down, that's it, what would I say is the main thing in my life? Some people would put good things, like things that you probably should say. Family. I'd be like, nah, no family. I'm not going to. You guys, you and Hayden, way down the bottom of the list. That would be bad. Let's just be honest. Some of us, then we would say, okay, church. We probably should say that. Making sure finances are good, we got to do that. Okay, good, fine. But what is the main thing that impacts everything? This is so simple that you're probably not going to forget this, because this is just the main thing. It's so obvious, is Jesus. Because when you keep the main thing, it keeps everything in perspective. It makes you go to work, and I am not always a happy-go-lucky, like, I get to do Pepsi today. I'm so happy and so excited, and it's just so good. And some days I'm like, whatever. I just want to get this over with. But if I keep Jesus my main focus, it gives me a perspective to why I am there. Another example is in the springtime, every year for 100 years. I don't know how. I haven't been here 100 years, but either Lydia will get a phone call, or they'll tell her to ask me, or they'll call me. Joel, can you time at the track meets? Can you be a timer? And some people think it's just because I love track so much that I just can't help myself. That's not the reason why. Or some people are like, you have so much time on your hands that you love, cross country is a quick sport. Like I could go there, watch Hayden run in the span of 15 minutes and get out of there and we're done. That's cross country. Okay? Track, it's like from 3 o'clock to like maybe sometimes 7, 8 o'clock. There's my night shot. And Joel, you just love that. No, there are times I go to the track meet where they not make me, that sounded bad. But they've asked me, would you time? And there are times I'm like, I don't really want to go. I'd rather go home and stay home and drink coffee with my family and that kind of thing. There's a lot of coffee in this sermon. But when I'm there, the number one thing that I am thinking about the entire time, even more than watching, because he's in track and he learned to like it. Track I did, but I didn't like it. Cross country I loved. But more than this, is the relationships with the people around me. There are hundreds of people who do not know Christ. That's why, how else can they know about Christ unless we let them know? And how else can we open up a relationship if they don't know who we are? Sometimes people are like, and who are you? I've never even seen you in this community ever. But that's why I do that. God has not told me no. God has said yes. Do those things. You enjoy going to track meets. You do. But keep your eye on the prize. Keep the main thing, let it be the main thing. Because Jesus impacts everything. Impacts everything. Impacts my relationships, my finances, the church. It impacts everything. And there's 2 more verses and then we'll be done. These are 2 important verses. I couldn't pick one, so I chose both. Hosea chapter 6, verse 6. Before we read this, how many of us have ever heard that the God of the Old Testament seems a little bit different than the God of the New Testament? He's angry in the Old Testament. He's happy. He's in a good mood in the New Testament, right? He's a vengeful, hateful God that kills and smites. But then in the New Testament, Jesus is smiling and almost like he's walking, like dancing almost, and he's all carrying sheep and he's all happy. Look, God never changes. And I read Hosea chapter 6, and it really is keeping the main thing. I love it because it says this. God's saying this to us. I want you, I want you to show love to other people. I want you to show love, not offer sacrifices. Pause right there. Sometimes we're sacrificing our health, running 1,000,000 miles a minute, and we're burned out. God wants you to show love. How many of us, when we're burned out, we're go to a place we can't show love to other people. We're bitter. We become bitter, hateful, griping. I want you to know me. This is God talking to us. I want you to know God more than I want those burnt offerings. We're so busy and like, I got to do this. God would rather us really get to know him so we can hear him, so we can be involved in the things that God's calling us to be involved and to say no to the things that God has said no to. We got to be able to hear God's voice to say yes to certain things. Track, sure, I'll do that. This, coaching football, like one year, no, I'm not doing that ever again. That was not a God thing. That made me so stressed out and so scared and nervous. But we won one game, right? But they asked me, and I was like, I got to be the hero. I mean, it was pathetic and sad. And I thought, hey, I'm a Seahawk fan. I could coach. I go up to the 9th or 8th grader. I'm like, so what play did you play last year? Do that one. You're the older kid. You got to lead this. Why don't you coach for a minute? Let me see. I just want to see. And then I made him do it, and he's all, yeah, this is good. Okay, we're good. We won against Lewis County. Everybody, I could beat them. But anyway, that was kind of mean. But now the last verse I'm going to read it in a different translation. It's a paraphrase, a message paraphrase, because we've read this over and over and over and over. But this verse, this paraphrase came out in the 90s when I was first a Christian. And I read this in college when I was burned out. I read this verse in this translation at Northwest University cafeteria, and I sat down and I read this. And this is what changed my life, was these verses. It's different in your translation, NIV or NLT or King James or whatever, but I want you to read this. This first part sounds like a commercial. I'm just throwing that out. Are you tired? Worn out? Burned out on religion? Take this. No, I like that. But Jesus has come to me. Get away with me, and you recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Boy, I love that. This is not just a Sunday afternoon nap, which I love. But this is a real spiritual filling up. Jesus says, walk with me and work with me. In fact, minister with me. See what I'm doing. See how I do it. Do you think Jesus was burned out? I don't know. I don't think so. Some people might prove me wrong. Say, what about this verse? I don't know. I can't see him as a burned out individual. I think his ministry gave him joy. I think serving other people gave him joy. He says, watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. Now, as we close in prayer, these verses in that paraphrase, some people, I don't want to read, that's a paraphrase. That's not really God's word. I don't know. God used these verses in that translation to change my life and to make me love reading the Bible again. Because I even got burned out of reading the Bible. When I was in Bible school, that's all we did. We read it for fun. We're like, hey, what about this? We started arguing with people in the dorms about, just for fun. What did Jesus mean when he said this? We just did it for fun. It was like we were Bible nerds. It was fun. I don't see the fun in it now of arguing about it, but I sat in the cafeteria at Northwest University, burned out and upset and frustrated, and I sat there at the kitchen, at the dining hall, mess hall, whatever you want to call it, and I just opened up, and I still have that Bible. I opened it up and I just read that part. And every single time that I get that itch, if you will, being burned out, that I go back to this. Maybe you don't like this. Go read in the translation that grabs a hold of you. Because I don't always read the message paraphrase, but this part, it's like, here's the answer right here. You're burned out, you're tired, you're weary. The answer is really simple. It really is. I can't believe I missed it in college for 4 years. I did ministry at the expense. Some people did ministry in college, and at the end of college, they ended up not being a Christian at the end of the college. And by God's grace, when I graduated and moved here, God changed me. But the answer is go to him. Go to Jesus. Get away with him. And you'll recover the life that God has called you to recover. Because some of us, we're not where we need to be with God. And so that's what I want to pray. And this week, I want you to evaluate some of the things that you involved yourself in. And I'm not going to be God. I'm not going to even pretend to be Moses, where Moses is making the decision for you. Dwayne, here's what you need. Here, you need to get rid of this part, and then that's a little too much in your business. That needs to be between you and God. where God is saying, Dwayne, this specific thing, no. This specific thing, out. You need to be part of this. You need to involve yourself in this, but not that. We need to learn to say no. Here's a secret. We need to allow God to give us the ability to say no without feeling guilty. Some of us need to work on that. And it's possible. Let's stand and pray. Jesus. Jesus. First, I ask, Jesus, that you would take glory and you would accept our worship because we worship you, Almighty God, because of who you are. And Lord, there have been moments in my Christian walk over the last 22 years, I can look at multiple times where I felt at the verge of burnout and it made me miserable. And I don't know who this message was for. Maybe it was for all of us. I don't know. Maybe it was just for me. I have no idea. But God, I pray that you would use the words that were spoken today from your word to say there's some things in our life that are not good. And especially those words where Jesus, where you told us, if we want to be full of you, we need to get away with you. We need to set some time aside to allow you to speak into our life, to fill us up. And God, I pray that there be no one in this room that would feel like they're doing life or doing ministry or serving you alone. That we lean on you, but we lean on each other because we're not supposed to do anything alone. But as we do our part and we link spiritual hands together and we're on doing the Father's business, that there's nothing that, God, you cannot accomplish through us because we are agreeing with your will. And Lord, have your will done on this earth as it is in heaven. And we thank you. I pray for blessing. I pray for encouragement as we walk out of here and go to our lunches and do different things. I pray that your supernatural power would lead us and guide us and direct us and bring us to the place that we need to be with you, God. And if there's anyone in this place that is on the verge of burnout or tired or weary, I pray that they would get away with you starting right now. We thank you in Jesus' name. And everybody said? Amen. God bless you.